Hello, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Fridays, Dire Literary Series. And tonight, 1 week fresh into her Pulitzer Prize is Diane Seuss. And what an honor it is to have her. And what I would like to do is tell you a little bit about her if you don't know, if people are new to her. So here she is, born in Michigan City, Indiana. Author of 5 books of poetry, Frank's Sonnets, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because at this point we can just show this. Frank's Sonnets, winner of 2022 Pulitzer Prize, 2021 National Book Critics Circle Award for Poetry, 2022 Penn Voelcker Award for Poetry Collection, 2021 Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Poetry, 2022 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, and that's just simply amazing. And so without anything further from me, let me turn it on over to Diane.
Hey, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. And thanks for inviting me, Timothy, weeks ago before we knew any of this was going to be happening. So our plan is I'm going to read for about 15 minutes and then we'll do a Q&A. Okay. So I thought I'd read from Frank's Sonnets. And here I go. Sometimes I can, excuse me, I'm going to start over. Sometimes I can't feel it, what some call beauty. I can see it, I swear. The conifers and fat bees, ferns like church fans, and then the sea, its flatness as if pressed by stones like witches were. The dark sand ridged by tides, strewn with body parts, claws, the stranded mesoglea of the moon jellyfish, transparent blob, brainless, enlightened in its clarity. I stand there, I walk the shore at low tide. There it is, the wind, cold, surf's boom drowning out thought. I can photograph it, I can name it beautiful, but feel it? I don't know that I am feeling it. When I drown in it, maybe then. This book started out in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State at a residency. And I was really trying to figure out how to write a memoir. And it came to me quickly, like a lot of things do with my poems, that I could maybe write a memoir in contemporary sonnets. And by that, I mean, they're not traditionally rhymed and metered like Shakespeare, but there's vestiges of the form in all of the poems, some more than others, but they aren't just 14 lines, let's say that. So I thought that I would begin our reading with something from out there. And while I was out there, I met a fabulous musician, Kurt Rohde, and we did some interacting and some collaborating. And he actually did an amazing full-length piece of music from my book, Four-Legged Girl, later. But this comes just a bit from our interactions. There's a whole sequence of poems in the book from Kurt, but here's one. There's a certain state of grace that is not loving. Music, Kurt says, is not a language, though people say it is. Even poetry, though built from words, is not a language. The words are the lacy gown, the something else is the bride, who can't be factored down even to her flesh and bones. I wore my own white dress, my hair a certain way, and looked into the mirror to get my smile right, and then into my own eyes. It's rare to really look, and saw I was making a fatal mistake. That's the poem, but went through with it anyway. That's the music. Spent years in a graceful detachment. Now silence is my lover. It does not embrace me when I wake, or it does, but its embrace is neutral, like God or Switzerland since 1815. Here's a childhood poem. Good old childhood. Who wants to be soft? I don't. I've even seen a hermit crab outgrow its shell and drag its perilous softness into a doll's head. Crab, I empathize. As a kid, I fed my big baby doll's bare foot into a rotating fan blade. I wasn't mean, not at all, inquisitive. Doll donated her toe to science. I mixed potions, iodine, nightshade, and some incongruity like a few drops of my dad's aftershave. He was dead by then, but there was a quarter bottle of aqua velva in the medicine chest, which I used sparingly. I wasn't planning to poison anyone, even my sister, who showed me how to harden up by folding her arms across her chest and scowling at Dad's abdominal tumor. Our mom slammed the door and drove to Lake Michigan. I pictured her making her way into the sheltering undertow. The Reverend Larry Whiteford sang when the gates swing open at the funeral, and the three of us sat there like Mount Rushmore. Anyway, Dad was a softie, Jesus a softie. Speaking of Jesus, the patriarch of Jesus Camp is dead. Father of Greg, who dragged a giant cross across the high school parking lot on Good Friday, is dead. Father of Charity, who wore pink house dresses to high school, is dead. White anklets, orthopedic shoes, duck-faced Charity, who Jesus stole early, embezzled, hijacked to heaven before we were ready. It's not fair, we cried, ground our teeth in our sleep, had to get bite splints. Even if the streets are paved with gold, we said, even if Charity can chip off some gold and use it to buy cosmetics, as if heaven has a Hook's drugstore, as if being pretty counts in a place where everything is pretty. The patriarch only smiled that way he did with a weed sticking out of the corner of his mouth. Charity was his daughter, but he said, and I quote, "To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord." What does that look like exactly? We cried. Are there chairs? Are there lambs to tend? Because you know how we get when there are no lambs to tend. He had a look in his eye like Charity had given him previews of coming attractions, but his lips were sealed, and now they're sealed for good, and now only an echo from the grotto. This is a sonnet that sort of is more sweeping. It's kind of, here's my life via the places I've slept. I've slept in many places, for years on mattresses that entered my life via nothing but luck. As a child on wet sheets, I could not contain myself. As a teen on the bed where my father ate his last pomegranate, among crickets and chicken bones and ditches, in the bare grass on the lavish grounds of a crumbling castle, in a flapping German circus tent, in a lean-to, my head on the belly of a sick calf, in a terrible darkness where a shrew tried to stay afloat in a bucket of well water, in a blue belfry, on a pink couch being eaten from the inside by field mice, on bare floorboards by TV light with Mickle on Locust Place, on an amber throne of cockroach casings, on a carpet of needles from a cemetery pine, in a clubhouse circled by crabapple trees with high school boys who are now members of a megachurch, in a hotel bathtub in St. Augustine after a sip from the fountain of youth, cold on a cliff's edge, passed out cold on train tracks, in a hospital bed, holding my lamb like an army of lilacs. Here's a New York poem. There's something to be said for having one plate, one spoon, a fork, a dull knife, living out of a red suitcase, eating when hungry, grabbing shut-eye when tired. You're high-natured, Joyce James said to me when I lived in NYC. We were in a cab on our Friday lunch break going to a record store. Decades later, I see I was not high-natured, only wanted love, though what that means, I don't know. Something about mystery, standing humbly at the gate of someone else's mystery and hoping for the sound, at least now and then, of the hinges turning. Mystery now, mystery then. As when I went up to a guy at the record store to ask him who did the song Refugee, and he said, me. And I realized after I found the album and looked at the photo and the cover, I'd asked Tom Petty, who did a Tom Petty tune I'd heard on the radio when I was hungry and tired and alone. Maybe two more I have time for. How about a little death on a Friday afternoon? How will I leave this life? Like I left my job, drifting off without comment, like mother took off to get schooled, shut the door hard on my crying, she had books to read. Our father in an ambulance, rotating lights swept red over oak trees, then the hospital bed, hallucinating warship and sea. Or the way my ex left us, dragging his clothes in a garbage bag through snow like fresh kill. Or like I left Kev. I had 20 minutes before he'd get home to try to change my mind or kill me. Out the red door with my dad's briefcase full of all my poems and the typewriter and sealskin coat. And then the airplane home. So freaked by the years with him in New York, I broke when I stirred up a grouse in the woods. Will I leave like a grouse leaves, drumming the air with its wings? Or like Freddie left the stage when Queen played Live Aid, glossed like a racehorse, top of his game? Or like I leave parties, no valedictions, out the door like smoke from extinguished candelabras. I guess I'll end with this is one of a sequence of poems about Mickle, who was my soulmate. I knew him from the time we met in high school art class. He died of AIDS in 1987, I believe. That was the year. before there were the drugs to help people live. Okay. Oh, and he's the guy on the cover of the book too. Things feel partial. My love for things is partial. Mickle on his last legs, covered in chaos lesions, demanded that I see the beauty of a mass of chrysanthemums. Look, he demanded. I lied that I could see the beauty there, but all I saw was a smear of yellow flowers. I wanted to leave that place. I wanted to leave him to die without me. And soon that's what I did. Even the molecule I allowed myself to feel of our last goodbye made me scream. What would have happened if I'd opened my heart all the way, as I was told to do, if I wanted Jesus to live inside one of its dank chambers? Whitman told me to unscrew the locks from the doors, unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs. Let love come streaming in, like when the St. Joe flooded Save-A-Lot and drove it out of business, the only store in town. Don't put my ashes in the river, Mickle said. Put them in a tributary. I did. I put them in a tributary without touching them. Now I want to chalk my fingerprints with them, but it's too late. I want to hold them like he held me and touched my upper lip and called it Cupid's cusp, a phrase that made me wince. I felt love all the way then and never since. Thanks, you guys.
Wow. Thank you, Diane. What a wonderful reading.
Thank you.
We've got some questions in the chat that I will jump to in a second. It seems like a lot of people want to talk about the Sonic, but I'm just going to start with a question though about, like, boys and girls, when they're growing up, they think they're going to maybe hit the winning homer in the World Series or perhaps grow up to be president of the United States. Now, when you were growing up, at what point were you thinking, I'm going to be a writer? And when you did that, did you think, I'm going to hit a home run and win the Pulitzer Prize?
Listen, I had no ambitions whatsoever. None. Where I'm from, very small town, working class town, and maybe too just the era that I grew up. There wasn't so much going on about ambition and hierarchy and climbing to the top of the mountain. And so I didn't think about being a writer, but I wrote all the time. And I did get support from a mentor who appeared out of the blue and brought me books and helped me get to college and fund it. But even when I was in college and I was learning, what I was really doing was just living a wild life, and which became the subject of my poems. So never did I think I'm going to win anything. I'm going to have a book. My first book came out when I was 40 years old. And actually the person who published it came after me and said, let me see a manuscript, which I didn't really know what that was. So, it's been a long learning curve. And I guess at a certain point, my second book won the Juniper Prize from the University of Massachusetts. And maybe something about that and the visibility of that showed me that I could have ambitions for my poems, not for myself so much, but for the poems. And I think of Frank as an entity separate from me. I don't feel like I won the Pulitzer. I feel like Frank did. And sometimes I call the book he won. And it's so unlikely and unexpected and beautiful. But no, I had no plot. I had no ambition, but it happened anyway.
Now, with Frank, obviously it's a book of all sonnets. What's the most fun about writing a sonnet for you?
Oh, I think when they just get going, and the musicality and how the music starts running the show. I really like letting the poems run the show rather than me. I think if we can get into that intuition, the poems are smarter and more imaginative than I am. Um, and so, for instance, like the poem I read, I've slept in many places, that poem, it has a volition and an energy, and it helps you remember. And then when I've only got 14 lines to get this shit done. So you're always writing with a sense of compression, and I'm getting to the end. I better get to the heart of the matter here. So I like that feeling. I love the sonnet. It felt like a companion.
Is it important what you leave out rather than what you put in?
They're both important, but there's a lot of leaving out, and it teaches you. I mean, I urge writers to work in that form for a while, because you really learn what is essential and what isn't. And now that I've just finished my next book, and it's no sonnets, it's all longer poems, some pretty long poems, and it terrified me. It's like being let out of a basement after, it's like Boo Radley. And and suddenly there's so much space and I don't know what to do with it. So I love that kind of thing where, you set yourself up for terror. And that's what I try to do with each thing that I work on.
All right, we have a question from Joni. He says, how much do you feel the sonnet form imposed on these poems? And was there pressure, and I'm going to add, or criticism to adhere to the traditional form?
I don't listen much to those. Well, if the inferences that the pressure came from outside of me, no. I did have a couple of reviewers say, well, they're not sonnets if they're only just because they're 14 lines, but I think they're missing something there, maybe. But no, I didn't feel that a book of sonnets in this era that adhered to the traditional form would be something that readers would want to approach. I think, other sonnet writers before me have opened up the idea of an American sonnet, a contemporary sonnet. Wanda Coleman was the first, Gerald Stern, Terrence Hayes. Terrence, I think, and I were kind of working on our sonnet books at the same time. But yeah, reading those, Wanda Coleman's American Sonnets, Gerald Stern's American Sonnets, they emboldened me to figure out what a sonnet was to me, to my work, to my rhetoric, to my imagination. And so that's what I did.
We had a question from Sam and Don, and Sam actually just won a pushcart award on a poem they wrote defending the modern sonnet. So
yes,
the question is, alternately,
I love that poem.
Does the form of the sonnet provide a powerful channel for this kind of heartbreak that you write about?
What could you say it again? I missed one word.
Okay. Does the form of the sonnet provide a powerful channel for this kind of heartbreak?
Yes. I think there are certain subjects in the book, I probably could not have approached without the form. The form was like a life raft. It held me up, and not just the form, but the previous practitioners of the form. And I don't mean just contemporary ones. I mean John Donne and Gerard Manley Hopkins, and especially Keats, who's my current boyfriend. Um, so you know, and Berryman, and then, you know, the contemporary ones I mentioned. So I felt the presence of those previous practitioners, and the form itself were allies in being honest about some of the stuff in my life that is almost too hard to language. And also be honest about who I am, my own foibles, my own mistakes. I don't want to be the hero of this book.
Yeah, we had Gregory Orr on here a couple of weeks ago, and
Mhm.
Gregory was like, "You have to write it because there's no choice in terms of tragedies." Do you feel the same way?
Yes. Well, yes. And it may take a lifetime, and you may write it and rewrite it and renegotiate it. You know, so I've had students, young students, who would say, well, I wrote a poem about my mother, you know, well, one ain't gonna do it, right? I mean, we all have two or three subjects, and we chip away at them for a lifetime. That's what's so great about a life and a poetry career, is that you have this chance to really work the things that you came here to work. And usually they're not easy.
I'm going to combine two questions, Lori and Jonas again. The question is, with a book of over 100 sonnets, was there any hesitation? And also with that amount, how did you choose to order them?
Okay. Well, yeah, there's 127. I wrote 154, so I did cut some. The only hesitation was, you know, I wanted to make sure that my press was okay with this fat of a book, because there's kind of a convention now for how long books of poetry ought to be, and this was thicker. And it also has a fold out in the center, a centerfold with two poems that are too wide for a single page. So, I mean, I think if I didn't have a track record with them, with Four-Legged Girl and Still Life with Two Dead Peacocks and a Girl, I don't know if the yes would have been so automatic, but the yes was automatic, which I really appreciate. So I knew what I was doing. I've never been too worried about breaking a mold. Um, it was more just wanting to make sure that was cool with my press, who that I respect so deeply.
Yeah, well, you need some good girth in those centerfolds. So the large poems are probably pretty amazing. Um,
Yeah. I didn't get to the how did you order. I ordered them
sure.
pretty much as they were written. I tried different things, and it all seemed unnatural. And so I liked the idea of the flow being um, echoing the flow of my remembering.
I read an essay by you, I think it was in Lit Hub, about living in a country that would rather have people die in order to save a buck. So, in terms of the pandemic, do you feel that we're still there? And did you write any poems that appear anywhere about that subject matter besides the essay?
Oh, well, I think in my next book, I do approach that subject. Frank was already pretty much finished by the time the pandemic hit. I was just revising. Um, but in a sense, I guess that's always my subject. You know, the tension between the powers that be, that often want us dead, and our own life force that pushes back. And so, right now, I think we're lucky not to have the previous administration at the helm, I'm still very scared, and that it will reemerge, and I worry about. I still am very concerned about COVID. I'm not one of the throngs who believes it's over.
All right. When you won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Poetry, your quote was, "Be led by the poem and not by the poem's product," which is wonderful sentiment. So I'd like you to maybe extrapolate a little bit more into that.
Yeah, well, it's so easy now to think of your work as a writer as a product. We're late stage capitalism, kids, and everything is about selling, marketing, branding. I'm not a brand. I don't want to be a brand. I'm a person, and poems are not products. And I think we need to help younger poets who have been raised with that mentality through social media to not feel that that is what it's about, because all that brings is anxiety and sorrow. I want to write an essay about it. I haven't had time to do that yet, but I want to, because I think the pressures, I see it in poets who post on social media and feel so bereft that they're not hitting the big time. I just think in a lot of ways that's putting the cart before the horse, and it makes writing itself, you can't really write if that's where you are. It screws up the juju.
All right, let's finish up with this final question. You write about some extremely deep and very often dark types of poetry. Now, do you feel that how far do you position yourself within the poem while you're doing that? Are you able to separate yourself? And also, do you consider the reader and how they might position themselves within your poem?
Great question. Well, speaking of Gregory Orr, who I've never spoken with, although I talk about him a lot, and I wish he'd talk to me. But he talks about that the poem is a made thing. It's a constructed object, and it's a work of art. And because of that, the poem is not the event itself. It's a piece of art about the event. And what's helpful, I'm not going to say healing because I don't like that word. What's helpful about that, for instance, in writing about very hot, intense, traumatic things, is that it becomes this thing outside of you that you work on, that you work like the Grecian urn, And so one thing I love about writing poems is that something takes over that's, almost clinical. And that's the relief of the craft part, that I'm crafting this, and I'm not immersed in the shit I'm writing about. It's a poem. I'm writing a poem. I'm not reliving an experience. I'm making something of it. And so it provides a level of objectivity that some people might think of as cold, but I don't think so. I think it's very helpful, and I think that's what it takes to make art.
That's a tremendous answer to that. And here's the book. Frank's Sonnet is available probably in every bookstore, and I'm sure that Graywolf can definitely order them right through the publisher's website. And Diane, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on everything.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your great questions, you and everybody else. Thank you for spending this time with me.
And the folks that are watching the live stream in the Facebook group, I'm going to shut you guys down now, but if you're interested in coming into the open mic, just use the Zoom link and we'll let you in and you can read. So we'll say goodbye to them right now. Thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you.